What people picture as a Jane Austen ending is about the same thing they picture as a fairy tale ending. A wedding and a promise of happily ever after. But are Jane Austen novels really like fairy tales? Let's take a look at some fairy tale history first. You've got your heavy hitters, Charles Perrault's French collection of tales, published in 1697, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm's German one in 1812 and 1818. The Grimm collection wasn't translated into English until a few years after Austen's death, but she could have encountered Perrault's in translation or in the original French, which she could read. In fact, as a child, she had a collection of French fables. And there were many other French writers of elaborate and fanciful fairy tales in Perrault's time, mostly women, whose work, such as the original Beauty and the Beast, might have reached young Jane. But here's the thing about fairy tales. More often than not, they're told orally, so it's pretty tough for a scholar to pinpoint exactly what Austen knew. Still, we can safely say Austen was well aware of, Cinderella, after all, who isn't? And fairy tales in general permeated the culture then, as they do for us now. I'd love to amble through every novel, but the clock's going to strike midnight, or in my case, 7:39, before we know it. So let's zero in on a single Austen sentence. We all know that Once Upon a Time launches fairy tales, but I have a feeling a lot of you could recite the opening of Pride and Prejudice as well. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Excellently done. There are three elements in this sentence that will be crucial to the rest of the novel and are crucial to fairy tales as well. Number one, the truth universally acknowledged. In typical Austen fashion, the narrator is poking fun at those things that everyone just knows to be true. Much of the conflict in Pride and Prejudice, and many of her other novels, springs from a discrepancy between what the heroine wants and what everyone around her insists upon, with the advantage of numbers. What's great about the truth universally acknowledged phrasing is that Austen skewers the assumption of widespread agreement by showing that those people see it as a kind of collective, even full wisdom, like how it's a truth universally acknowledged that you shouldn't let a black cat cross your path. Many of the morals in fairy tales are supposed to convey just this kind of wisdom to children. Watch out for wolves in the forest, don't be deceived by appearances, etc. And where does this wisdom come from? Members of the older generations. The truth universally acknowledged in Pride and Prejudice is in fact the opinion of the heroine's overeager mother. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, like many Austen parents and otherwise controlling older characters, don't come off very well. Mrs. Bennet is too meddling, her husband too passive. Like fairy tale parents, they have life experience, but don't always use it to best effect in helping their children. Some fairy tale parents abandon their children. Others are simply already dead, like many Austen fathers, leaving their children with financial hardships. Whatever the degree, the common denominator in the portrayal of parents in Austen novels and fairy tales is a clear conclusion that it's time for parents to step aside for their children to embark on adulthood. Okay, element number two, the good fortune, money. Austen's always unmarried heroines need it. Since it's 200 years ago and they really can't get jobs, they have a very practical reason to marry a man who can provide for their basic needs, like mansions. These girls have a tendency to marry into families richer than their own. As in many other 19th century novels and many fairy tales, a happy emotional ending isn't enough. You need a secure financial and social position as well. In fairy tales, this rags to riches plotline extends far beyond Cinderella. Plenty of unassuming young fairy tale protagonists, both girls and boys, end up living happily ever after as royalty. Finally, element number three, being in want of a wife. Marriage, double weddings, Prince Charming. Austen's heroines are always dealing with matters of the heart, and they always get married in the end. And you don't need me to tell you that popular culture still associates weddings and romance with fairy tales. Heck, you can walk into a bridal store and see dresses advertised as fairy tale dresses, whatever that means. For real, Alfred Angelo has a Disney fairy tale dress line. What can I say? Dating back to pre-literary societies, fairy tales have been associated with women. Mother Goose figures telling stories around the hearth, the symbol of home and domesticity, and they have historically been about female characters far more often than many other kinds of literature are. As in Austen's novels, a girl's choice of husband matters enough to be the subject of an entire story. Overall, the events in Austen's novels evoke all sorts of fairy tales. Despite differences dictated primarily by genre, as a novelist, Austen fills in far more details than a teller of fairy tales, I would argue that at root, the majority of fairy tales show the same thing an Austen novel does. A young protagonist realizing it's time to move on to the next stage of life, confronting all the uncertainties of that journey, and finally succeeding. There are plenty of skeptical critics out there today who worry that stories leading toward a heroine's marriage send a pernicious message to young girls, that finding a man should be her one goal in life. But that argument only works if a reader focuses on nothing but the very end of the story. Fairy tales are peppered along the way with struggles and wonders and surprises. Austen novels have even more going on. The reader is privy to the head and heart of the heroine as she rides every single wave of getting along with her family, adjusting to new experiences, making new acquaintances, and learning to read the language of her own heart. If that's not a quest worthy of a fairy tale and equally worthy of any 21st century reading, I don't know what is.